Hi everyone, welcome to This Photo Life. I'm your host, Andy McSweeney. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, gang, here we are at episode 3. Hope you've enjoyed what's come to pass with those first 2 episodes. And, well, for today, moving forward for this first week of March in 2015, we are going to be talking about finding time for your photography, gang. That is the topic of the day here on This Photo Life. Hopefully it's something that's of value to you. I think this is something we can all relate to. That's part of why I wanted to talk about it here on the show today. Because, well, I mean, finding time in life in general is hard. So imagine what it's like on the photography side of things. Trying to dip away, get a weekend, get some time out, do something on holiday in the photographic way. It doesn't always work out, gang. And that's why I'm going to be talking about it on the show today. I'm going to throw out some thoughts on the topic in general, of course, but then I'll be breaking down some advice that I think will be of help to you. Okay, so that's going to be the main topic on the show today. I should also mention that'll be the only main topic on the show today and moving forward, except for a couple of special occasions. Because, I mean, gang, I think when it starts going to an hour very quickly with 2 main topics, a featured inspiration, intros, outros, awesome music by Biaz, it just gets a little bit long, and it does threaten the focus of those 2 topics if I clump them together and just try and get it out there all in one go for that episode, okay? So we're not going to do that so much anymore. Every now and then, I'm sure I'll dip into the double topic side of things, or maybe if I have something especially long to talk about, you know, like I say, I'm Photo Tour Brugge for the last few years in the sense of showing people around Bruges with their cameras. So certainly Bruges could be a full episode where we go over 20, 30 minutes. But by and large, gang, we're going to stick to the focus side of things, keep it to one main topic, intros, outros, music by Biaz, featured inspiration, all that gets to stay, but everything gets a little more trim around it. Okay, so hopefully that works for you. You know, I mean, on a housekeeping note too, I guess if we're going through things that are just sort of growing and changing and taking shape on This Photo Life, well, I guess I should say, gang, that, you know, I mean, I've gotten a couple of emails about this, and no one's been nasty. Everyone's been very understanding, and certainly no one's calling me out in a rude kind of way. But I just want to throw out there, because I certainly hear it when I listen to the shows for post-game analysis, that I do say guys a lot. Okay, so I just want to make it clear here, I'm not referring specifically to the dingle carrying crowd. I do mean all of us here in This Photo Life, men, women, anything in between. You know, I mean, we're all carrying cameras. And when I say guys, it is gang, it is folks, it is my peeps, my homies, you know, you all, whatever works for you, that's what I'm referring to. It's just my go-to expression when I'm digging out words out of my brain so that I don't sound like an idiot here on the air. Okay, so gang, hope that all makes sense. Hope the time shift makes sense. Hope you all know that I'm not talking just to the dingle carrying crowd here. And, you know, hopefully you like it. As always, you can let me know on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, even LinkedIn. I got an account, you know, my CV's online. So any of those social networks, you can find me either as Andy McSweeney, Andy McPhoto. And if you do, feel free to follow, like, click +1, do some retweeting, all that good stuff. And at the same time, feel free to leave me a comment about the show. Because, you know, this show doesn't exist in a void. I like to hear what you guys like to hear about the show or like to know about the show and maybe want to hear on the show. So hit me up on all those networks. Same time also, you can of course hit me up on my website. That is andymcphoto.com, andymcphoto.com. And gang, once you're on the site, look out for the little icon for This Photo Life for these episodes, or just click on blogs and pods. And of course, while you're there, feel free to check out my photo work. All right, so that's the housekeeping out of the way. We mentioned how we're going to talk about finding time for our photography on the show today. And I think I reaffirmed that the dingle crowd isn't the only crowd I'm looking for here or talking to. All right, so Now that we've lost a main topic every week, I have a little more time in this intro to babble on, I guess, about my photo life. It's certainly not the blah, 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 me show as far as this photo life. But I figure, hey, you guys are probably tuning in to hear a little bit what's going on with Andy's life behind the camera. So, either you can know what your buddy's up to, know what your ex-guide from Photo Tour Brugge is up to, or who knows, maybe pick up some useful advice on your side of things. Okay, so having said that, what's going on with my life right now? Wow, gang, it's the low season right now. January and February, even March are the quiet times in Bruges. So as far as being Photo Tour Brugge, the weekends are still going well, and the tour is going well. So certainly not sitting around twiddling my thumbs too much. So just generally catching my breath, trying to sleep in a little bit. Let my brain recharge from the year past for the year that's coming up. And aside from obviously starting up the podcast, like I say, just chilling. Not all of it is totally chilling. Some of it is also recovery. Some of you may have seen that I had a minor surgery a few weeks ago. I had a cyst removed from my wrist. Not a small thing. Luckily, it was minor surgery. 3 weeks in, I've already got the soft cast off. I've actually got it totally exposed now, even the skin sealed up, and it's all looking good on that side of things. And, it's kind of nice not having a small grapefruit in my wrist. So that's all well and good. As far as it relates to this photo life, it is my camera hand, as I mentioned. So, I'm still watching it as far as getting healthy again. I am picking up cameras again. Also on my side of the photo life, I did pick up that mirrorless Fuji a couple of weeks ago. I talked about that on the last episode a little bit. But, as far as recovery and not hurting myself so that I have to go back to the doctor in 2 weeks, that tiny little camera definitely helps on the old rest and recovery while still getting a few photos in. So definitely not too bad on Andy's side of this photo life, okay? And, if there's anything else to share on this photo life before we take the break and then come back and talk about finding times on your photography, well, gang, there's one little extra thing to share this time around. I'm real proud of it because it was actually done before I started this photo life. So it's technically my very first effort at putting something out on the internet. But it's not actually through this photo life. Gang, I was featured this past week, February 25th is the exact date. That's around when the episode went out of Your Itinerary with Rob Knight. That's a travel photography podcast. It's part of the TWIP network, which if you caught episode 1 and heard me talk about photo podcasters, you'll know it's a very fine network. Well, gang, it's either a testament to their quality or an exception to the rule that they had old Andy on the show for Your Itinerary. And they didn't just talk to me about what's going on in my photo life. That's what I have this show for, and they certainly don't want to bore people with me. But being that I'm Photo Tour Brugge the last few years, Rob had me on the show to be a travel expert for Bruges. And it went fairly well. I threw out some advice on the photo front for old Bruges here. It's a little bit general, but there are a few specific tips to definitely help you out on that side of things. I'm not going to leave you wanting. Want you to drop by my tour, but at the same time, Rob was a top fella. Your Itinerary is an excellent travel photography podcast, and frankly, all that TWIP stuff is good. So it was a real pleasure to be on the show, an absolute delight to share out some stuff, and highly recommend you check it out, especially if you're thinking of doing a trip to Bruges or at the same time just want to see Andy's face in the old home office. Okay, so for that, if you're watching me on the YouTube link that I throw up every week to mirror these episodes, just look out for a link right now on your screen. Otherwise, check out the show notes either on the YouTube side of things, or of course, you can go to my website, as I mentioned, www.andymcphoto.com/blog, or click on blogs and pods. And then this episode, check out the show notes there, and there will be a link to Your Itinerary. Episode 18 in Bruges is the one if you're just going with your Google Foo. All right, gang. So that's what's going on with Andy. That's what's going on with the show today. I think it's just about time to take a break. As you know, on the break side of things, we have some top quality breaks for you here because we got Biaz dropping by on the musical sense every time we do this Photo Life episode. So why don't we kick back, listen to what this fine fella's leaving us on the music front this week, and then I'll be back to talk about finding time for your photography. All right, take it away, Biaz. Break.
Get up, get up, dust off, get up, get up, dust off, dust off. Bone crushing, bone breaking as I get into turntable, tape deck, and amplifier busted.
Danger in his eyes, I'll let you know he's a brawler.
Hit your pressure points with light skills. I'll be the blaster. Tell you what's master.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the music, gang. As always, kindly provided by Biaz. If you enjoyed it, well, after the show, get over to soundcloud.com/Biaz, and you can check out a little bit more of the funky stuff. All right, let's get back into the photography side of things. We're talking about finding time for your photography. As I alluded to in the intro, gang, I mean, this is something that affects us all up and down the photo spectrum as far as I'm seeing it. I mean, when I'm leading my workshops/photo tours as Photo Tour Brugge, I ask a lot of people, what's your biggest challenge in your photography? And you'd be shocked, gang, that up and down the scale, casual, hobbyist, intermediate, even working professionals all look at me with a little bit of sadness in their eyes and say, I just don't have enough time for my photography. And, you know, I'm feeling that too. Believe it or not, gang, even though I get to run around and do photo stuff left, right, and center for Photo Tour Brugge, for client work, for all that sort of stuff in between, as far as actually getting photos that I love to take, I mean, you know, I love Brugge to bits, and it's definitely a pleasure to shoot for the tour, but I also enjoy shooting India and traveling around India and going other places. You know, I finally got a holiday this summer, and we're going to be going to Croatia for 2 weeks. I'm really looking forward to that. It's funny, as much as I enjoy shooting Brugge for myself, it does have a bit of urgency around it on the Photo Tour Brugge side. And that does mean that I might get a little less time than I want to actually take photos for myself or some of the projects that I want to do, even when I am based around Brugge, not over in India or Croatia or somewhere in between. And I think we're all suffering here, as I say. You know, if you're a casual photographer, if you're just doing this like pure, real low level, just I like to chill with my photos here and there between my holiday, well, I think already just telling me that on your priority list, you're probably struggling for time already because, well, photos aren't your biggest priority on the list. So that's no surprise that you're going to be a little short on time. But as soon as you start talking about people getting into their photography, whether it's, you know, hobbyist, intermediate, pros, like I say, we all tend to suffer a little more heavily at that end because we feel that fire for photography, but at the same time, we've got real life around us. We might be able to sneak away for a day on the weekend, but we might want that whole weekend. Or even that day on the weekend is only a few hours compared to the sunrise to sunset we'd like to play out. So this is something, like I say, I think we're all feeling. For what it's worth, gang, I have some advice on that side of things. You know, I'm here to help you on the photo front. That's what this photo life is all about. I would point out at the outset, I mean, you know, part of the problem in a way of finding time is that this modern world does tend to have its demands. You know, I mean, depending who you talk to, the future isn't looking the super sunniest. And especially if you have kids, you're preparing towards that. In the general sense anyways, even when it was the golden age, we all made sure to do our work hours and keep things tight as far as working our future. But you know, that does mean that you're going to have less time in the day. And when you talk about the modern times, well, we got a lot more responsibility, a lot more is expected out of us, and that means we're going to have a lot less time. I mean, at the outset, that could be a little challenge, but also remember, gang, there's two sides to every coin. For all the demands that the modern world has put upon us as far as getting things done, it's also partly because it's introduced tools that let us get things done faster. So, I mean, you can look at how you have all this technology at your disposal, from smartphones, tablets, stuff on the go to just your home computer and what that opens up. You know, if you look at it fairly carefully, you'll realize that it does take, but it also does give. So already on the outset, you want to just be looking at like where you're at and what's around you as far as the situation demands. I mean, if I'm looking at a situation in any way, in a fresh way to try and improve it, I start by just looking around and seeing what's going on. So, I mean, when I stop and look and see what's going on nowadays, it all boils down to the modern world demands out of me. So I get a little less time than I'd like, but at the same time, it opens up a lot of time if I use its tools properly. Okay, so that's our general starting ground. You know, we're here in 2015. That's our jumping off point. I sort of allude to it when I talk about the technology, but I guess my first pure practical tip is just make time. Make time and don't waste time. It's a bit of a two-parter, that one, but it's all sort of under the banner of efficiency. You know, when I say make time, obviously we can't create time out of thin air. We'd all be doing it. But you can make time when you look at your overall efficiency. Look at how, I don't know, you're doing your shopping. If you're doing it 7 days a week and stopping, queuing up just for like a couple of things, when you could do it once or twice a week and get it all out of the way and, I don't know, save 20 minutes over those 7 days, well, that's 20 minutes more for shooting or in some way, shape, or form, working on your photography. Same time also, you don't want to be wasting time. I mean, that's part of making time in the sense of the efficiency thing. That's why they're sort of interconnected. But, you know, I mean, as far as not wasting time, make your time as efficient as you can and then just use it properly. Do what you got to do, build a system, schedule it all out, figure out where you can shave those minutes, how you can keep things tight, and just get to where you need to get and how you need to get there the way you need to get there properly. All right. So it all falls under the efficiency banner. And I would point out, gang, I mean, this goes for when you're shooting, especially the not wasting time side of things. So when you actually do get those precious moments to go out shooting, I would like to hear that you've been doing some of the other steps I talk about, which involve, I mean, basically just keeping your photo mind fresh, whether it's creatively, technically, getting your practice in, getting inspired, playing with your gear so you're familiar with it at the time. You know, that practice and that study and all these side things that I'm talking about here, those will add to when you're actually on the shoot and just with those precious minutes to catch the shot. Okay, so it all falls under efficiency. Make time and don't waste time. All right. I would also certainly be looking at browsing other photographers. Like I said, with technology, you have so much on your hands. This is where, like, the golden age of technology through the internet as it is out there and shining. You can jump on your tablet, you can jump on your phone, you can jump on whatever's in between, on your way to work, 10 minutes to spare before dinner, what have you, even just like the ads that you see as you're walking down the street. That's all browsing other photographers. You look at that work, you take inspiration where you can, whether it's creative, whether it's technical. You know, what story are they trying to tell? How are they trying to tell it? What was that technique they used with the lighting, or that idea that I got because of the wide lens for that holiday landscape? You know, all of that is valuable information, and all you have to do is just, instead of looking at it as an ad, oh, blah, I'd love to be taking my photos, think, next time I am out there taking photos, based on what I'm seeing in front of me, how is that going to make my photo better? All right? So that's a way to think about that side of things. Just be browsing other photographers left, right, and center. And gang, you know, I mean, we haven't become complete slaves to the screen yet. Good old-fashioned paper, a book in your pocket, you know, a few photos sitting on the desk to just keep things fresh, and you swap it over with easy frames. I don't know. But, you know, you don't really need to have fancy phones, tablets, all that sort of things. All right. So be browsing other photographers, whatever it takes, however you get there. It's all really good stuff towards your own photography. And then when you're on the site, I mean, it's inspiration and it's useful anyways, but because you'll have that idea in your head, you'll have something that you'll be aiming towards when you're actually on the shoot. And of course, you did your research through the internet, through the screens, all your studying, everything else. And that kind of helped make sense of it. So when you were actually on site, you got to where you need to get without spending all day on one shot. Okay? On that side of things too, I mean, I mentioned research and learning and that kind of thing. Well, this is again, gang, where technology and the golden age of the internet, where all this information is bouncing around there relatively freely, it all comes to a pass, you know? You have tutorial centers, learning centers, if you will, where everything's concentrated. You pay a subscription and, you know, you can dive into your photo heart content. Or you can just be looking at, like, digging around the internet, whether it's hanging around a few websites, going to forums, hanging out on YouTube and YouTubing out your problem in the search way. That's all there. As far as it being there between those two dividing lines, then you just got to look at further efficiency of, like, cost to time. These learning centers, and to name a few, I'd certainly say lynda.com, KelbyOne, the Arcanum, TWIP seems to be up to something. This Week in Photography seems to be putting together something interesting. And Craft and Vision have some interesting stuff on that side of things, especially on the learning books. I mean, you look at those, and that's a nice focused way to sort of get into your photography a little more directly. then you just sort of figure out what works better for you. Do you like it all in a concentrated sort of way where you pay a subscription or a one-off fee? Or do you hunt around the internet, hang out corners and see what you can see? And then when you need something specific, obviously, happy hunting to you as you search around lots of internet. So decide which one works for you. Personally, I can't really say. I'm pretty good at my Google Foo, so I find I'm managing. I can dig around and get to where I need to be. Over time, you start understanding where you got to look and how you got to look for it. But at the same time, places like Lynda, Kelby, Arcanum, Craft and Vision, TWIP, even individual instructors like Abarionex Perello, host of The Candid Frame. He's got a nice pack. I'll put a promo in the show notes. It'll say next to it how I don't get a commission. That all matters. That's all good stuff. And it's all just sitting there waiting for you. And if you don't have the cash or you feel like I'm not paying for this, well, get around the internet and dig around and see what you got. All right? So learning centers, education centers, whatever you want to call them. And then, of course, just digging around the internet in a big, wide way. There's plenty out there. Hey, don't forget on the learning front, gang. And this is where you may decide where you want to pay or not, because, sometimes these paid services have some pretty exclusive stuff. Kelby's got Jay Maisel, who is one of the most wonderful speakers on photography I've ever heard. And he's a Kelby only man. So, for that sort of stuff, you are going to be paying up. But at the same side of things, don't forget that a lot of photographers are not just bundling under these services or even selling pre-packed stuff. You dig around enough, maybe you find a good photographer who's really throwing it out there. Gregory Cazillo would be one that comes to mind on YouTube. Same story with Serge Ramilly, especially if you're into your editing and HDR side of things. Well, every day they tend to, or quite often they tend to upload videos and not really ask a penny other than maybe donations or something, or checking out their workshop. So there's plenty of learning out there, whether you go for the paid focused option, whether you go for the DIY, find it yourself of Google, YouTube, and anything in between. It's all out there. And you can take it on the go. It works out dead easy. So I'd be thinking about it, gang. All right. And then at the same time, gang, this is related to the learning centers and just poking around the internet at large. I'd be really checking out photography podcasts. I know I totally have a horse in this race, and the fact that this is a photo podcast. You're listening to this Photo Life, a photo podcast where I help you out on your photography. I'm your host, Andy McSweeney, blah, blah, blah. So, I'm a podcast, total disclosure. But gang, there's a reason I'm doing this podcast format. And, it works. There's something to be said for talk radio. It's been around long before the internet. I think the internet is embracing it nicely with this podcast. Download it and listen to it on the go format. And as far as photography, there is just a ton out there. So much. And some of it is really, really good. All it takes is just going over to iTunes, typing photography, maybe doing some Google Foo in the same respect with podcast on the end, and you're going to find some pretty good stuff pretty quick. My first episode, I listed off photography podcasts in a little more detail, so you're going to want to go over to my website, andymcphoto.com. If you're watching YouTube right now, you'll see a link that'll take you directly to that article. To give you a few here, and I'll recap them on the show notes like I did for that episode. Gang, I would be looking at The Candid Frame, The Art of Photography, On Taking Pictures, The Grid, Photo Focus, Chase Jarvis, and, Martin Bailey Photography, This Week in Photo, the whole This Week in Photo TWIP network. Even if you just went by TWIP, I think you get 6 months worth of stuff to get you started. All right. So those photography podcasts, they're easily downloadable. They're audio in many cases. So, you can just plug in the headphones and go to work, be able to absorb them. And they should get your photo neurons fired up in a little more of a direct way. Okay. And these tips are all around actually taking photos. I know you want me to say okay, now we're going to suddenly build this time machine and this is how you do it so you can carry your SLR with you every day. But that would defy the point, because then you're out there specifically chasing photos and you have your gear in hand and you've probably got a little more time towards it. Otherwise, you might not have that big DSLR or even the mirrorless in your hand. So, what do you do when you're actually out there on the road? For me, gang, it comes down to a few things. It's just thinking a little bit different. And even then, it's not even so far out left field. I mean, first and foremost, you want to be reaching for your smartphone if you don't have any other camera on hand. That's just a bit of a no-brainer. You know, I mean, one of the oldest expressions in photography, the best camera you have is the one you have with you. Well, that camera's always there. So, I mean, if I see something worth chasing, I can go for it with my camera phone. It may not be that I can print it up to a large format and be totally satisfied with it afterwards, as far as like the pixel quality, print it up to my wall mount. But frankly, then I'll just work around that by not printing up big and being happy that I was able to capture some sort of photo of the moment. And, you know, there's a lot of value to that. That's also where we start talking about in more traditional camera land about like zoom lenses and fixed lenses. Sure, you only have your smartphone with you, but you can go in there and do what you need to do. You may not have your zoom lens with you on your big camera, but if you have a fixed 50 or even a little bit wider, you can jump right in there and get it one way or another. All right, so same attitude with the smartphones of one shape, brand, or another. It's just like, it's there, the situation's there, just do it. All right? Oh, and before I mention a little bit more, I would also say, gang, big old famous expression in photography, your first 10,000 are your worst. That's been amended a little bit to your first 100,000 now that we're digital. But, I mean, some of those can be on the iPhone, gang. And they may be some of your worst, but also you're going to get some really good ones in there invariably. Especially if you're doing your practice, getting your time in, flexing those photo muscles in the brain in one way or another, that's going to produce some nice results, and you won't care less if it blows up bigger than a postcard. Okay? And then, guys, I would also point out, like, the tech is awesome. So if we're having a smartphone discussion, I think in 5-10 years, as far as like limits for detail quality, printing sizes, all that sort of things, it's going to be a little bit obsolete. Obviously, it's a different format as far as the technical end of, it's a camera phone, not a DSLR. And the fact that the sensor is kind of close to the lens, so you get a lot of depth of field or different optics. But I mean, gang, come on. It's working. You can work with it. That's all there is to it. And as far as the tech goes, just be patient, Come on, nerds. I'm one of you, but I think you're going blind pixel peeping if that's your biggest concern. All right? And gang, on the smartphone front, I would just briefly mention there is something nice about going back to basics. You could say the same discussion for a compact camera, especially now that they're getting folded into smartphones, essentially. Back to basics is not a bad thing. You put down the big camera with all the options, all the switches, all the things that could distract you from just getting to your photo. And there's something to just like pressing the button, and a smartphone can open up that sort of environment where you're just going back to basics. And don't forget, gang, I mean, these smartphones are smart. You can load up apps. If you don't want back to basics, if you want sort of that middle ground where you still have options and control, well, I mean, once you start digging around even the photo app on an iPhone, there's a lot on offer there. But same time also, you can just go to the App Store, download an app that's a little more hardcore. I mean, Camera Plus would be a good starting point. Or if you want to go to the other end, 645 is a pretty awesome app to claim power. But it does mean that you can still use that smartphone and have those buttons and switches on hand, even if they're on your screen instead of on the body. Okay. And one more thing, guys, that also on that whole back to basics thing, that applies both ways. It's sort of like the size of the camera itself. Big camera is all well and fun, and it has a nice big heft. But on the other side of that, people see that big camera a little more obviously. And if you're doing something subtle and don't want to be seen, that could be a real deal breaker. But even if you're not, if you're doing a straightforward portrait of a stranger on the streets of Manali or something, you may want to think about how big that camera is and how they might be intimidated by it. The smaller camera, the iPhone, it's very, very subtle. And if you're doing some sneaky street, well, someone might think you're just texting your grandmother instead of actually snapping a few stories of life as it happens. So I'd be thinking about that side of things, huh? All right. Well, gang, I mean, as an extension of that, I mentioned compact cameras, but it also opens up the discussion to mirrorless cameras a little bit. This is something I also already covered on the show in episode 2, and it was for good reason. I mean, mirrorless cameras are pretty awesome as far as the power and flexibility that you get nowadays, and the fact that they're applying a lot of the same technology that you get out of the big cameras. I mean, technical loss is fairly minimal here, gang, especially at this point. So, I mean, it relates to compact cameras, iPhones, all that sort of things, but especially with mirrorless cameras, I'd be thinking about throwing a compact or a mirrorless in my bag, gang. I mean, you may not be able to use it all the time because you're rushing down to work or whatever, but if suddenly you see a scene and you have 10 seconds to stop and you feel your iPhone isn't quite enough for the task, DSLR is a bit too big to throw into the briefcase or the work bag, well, a mirrorless will fit in there just fine, chances are. And certainly a compact will fit in there. And when I mention compacts, gang, part of why they're still part of the discussion instead of just saying, just use your smartphone is there's some pretty high-end compacts out there. Big sensors, nice optics. The top-end Sony RX100 certainly comes to mind very, very quickly. But then if you move through to the mirrorless side of things, I mean, the price is better for the value you get. You can change lenses, you can do stuff. The lenses are smaller, everything's smaller. So, packing a couple of things isn't so much of a big deal. And that means if something opens up and you can get to the camera quickly enough, of course, well, you got a fighting chance at some glory there. So I'd be looking at, if my smartphone isn't enough, going to like a high-end compact, a mirrorless camera, that sort of range of things. All right? I mean, beyond that, gang, there are a couple ways to think about it after that. What do you do with your photos? You did all that work around getting your photos. You thought about stuff. You looked at other photographers. You did a little bit of study. You were already like tightening up your time and everything else. So, I mean, where does it go from there? You actually go out and take some photos, use the smartphone, you use the compact, you use the mirrorless, you get what you need to get. Life's busy. What are you supposed to do with it from there? Do you start dumping it all on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever else? Or do you make something like a little bit classy and dedicated out of it? Something that you can both manage into your daily life, as well as doing honor of not just like dumping out every photo just because you found 5 minutes to take a shot. Well, gang, this is where I'd be looking at a 365 project. This is a photo a day project, to use another name, but I like 365, so we're calling it that. And that's sort of as the fuller name implies. You take a photo a day and you post it online. Photo a day. That's all it is. Could be a snapshot, could be something from the archive. It should be something I think that you snap as you go so it stays fresh and you're sort of motivated to pull out the camera. But all it is, gang, is getting a photo out there one time a day for one whole year. It is a lot easier than you'd think. I mean, we have social media and all kinds of photo sharing sites out there to make it even easier. And on the 365 side of things, as far as doing it as a dedicated project and finding a good space where it could work out properly, there are plenty of 365 project websites. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. I'm going to link to a couple of free ones in the show notes. So get over to my site afterwards so you can check those out. But it's a nice, easy project. Frankly, even if you don't really feel like posting it online, it's just a good way to keep your shooting fresh, all right? So gives you a reason to drag around the smartphone, the mirrorless, the compact, everything else, because you're actually aiming to take one photo a day and get it online. All right? After that, gang, I don't know how much more I can tell you. Certainly, I would mention that photo tours, workshops, dedicated time towards learning or focusing on your photography should be on your list here. I do have a horse in the race as far as being Photo Tour Brugge. That's what I've done for the last 3 years. I do it daily, 3 times a day, 4 if you want to count the private tours. That's what I do, but it helps. It helps you with your photography. That's what I'm there for. It's not just to sing about my stuff for a couple hours. It's to get you to the photos, whether it's in Bruges or beyond. But that means that one way or another, for at least a couple hours a day, you're focusing up on the photo side of things full and proper. And then by extension, it works the same for workshops. You can get a week away in Burma with, Jay Maisel, because he's a legend. Well, you go over there for a week, you'll learn a lot on photography because you're just thrown into an environment where it's just saying it's all photo all the time from now on. Okay? So, I mean, that sort of thing, putting yourself into an environment that just embraces, encourages, even just shoves photography down your throat. For me, photo tours, workshops, even night classes, some sort of study in some way or another, or just something that gets you to your photos in a little bit more of an efficient way. Hey, that's opening up time, and that's directly finding time for your photography. All right? And then leave you with one more thing, gang, for the finding time on your photography side of things. Let's just say one more thing here. And this is a little abstract. It won't actually get you any photos, but I think it'll get you photos in the long term. Because, gang, when you're there and that moment is like right there in front of you, you reach for the smartphone, you reach for the camera, you reach for the mirrorless, you reach for whatever you were reaching for, whether it's shooting time, whether it's not shooting time, and you just fell upon it. You go for it, and you actually miss the moment. Well, even when you miss the moment, when you don't get the photo, I want you to think about how you'd photograph it anyways. All right? So I am in fact saying I want you to take a photo with your mind. But it applies, guys. You know, I mean, you do this, you think about like what lens you would have chosen, what settings you would have gone for, which camera you would have preferred to have in your hand, what angle you would have jumped down for, what you actually would have done to get to that angle. Well, that's all firing off the photo neurons. And trust me, when you go for your next shot, when you actually have a shot at it properly, all that sort of thinking about it will just program your brain towards getting the shot a little more clearly. And that means that you've opened up time. That means you're not mucking around. That means you're not crying afterwards about, oh, I missed that wonderful shot. You know, it's just right there waiting for you. So think about how you take the photo, even if it's just with your mind. Okay? That's what I got for you on the side of finding time with your photos. I hope it was helpful. Do let me know in the comments, especially also let me know in the comments if I missed out anything. This is all learning, growing experience. I got some ideas, but I'd love to hear yours. So get over to my website, andymcphoto.com, click on blogs and pods, or just add /blog to andymcphoto.com. And well, you'll see the episode list. This is episode 3. You can click on that, give it another listen, see the show notes, leave a comment. Let me know what I'm doing right. Let me know what I'm doing wrong. Let me know what I'm remembering. Let me know what I'm forgetting. Let me know what I'm drowning on about when I talk about letting me know stuff. And just generally say, hey, all right. And of course, if you're not on my website, but you are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, oh, geez, even on LinkedIn, feel free to drop me a line. Follow, click, like, retweet, wave your hands in the air, but make it committed on a digital front. Well, that's not going to hurt either. And of course, you can leave a comment on one of those social networks too. Okay, so that's what we got as far as finding time with your photography. Hope it helps, gang. Now I'm going to take a break, and we're going to check out some of Biaz and what he has for us this week. Then we'll come back with some featured inspiration and the wrap-up.
Here's a little story that must be told.
Flavor from the fader, which my DJ hold.
Here's a little story that must be told.
Still when I'm heated, how my heart stay cold.
Here's a little story that must be told.
Flavor from the fader, which my DJ hold.
Here's a little story that must be told.
Still when I'm heated, how my heart stay cold.
Here's a little story that must be told.
Flavor from the fader, which my DJ hold.
Here's a little story that must be told.
Still when I'm heated, how my heart stay cold.
All right. Thank you, BS, for that mighty fine music so far. You definitely bring up the audio points here on this Photo Life. We appreciate you for it. And gang, hope you're enjoying the show so far. We've been talking about finding time for your photography this episode. Hope that last segment where I got into the nitty-gritty of it helped. I do have a little bit more before we wrap up this episode of this Photo Life, because of course, as I talked about, we're trying to keep things a little bit tight. I don't think we made that 20-30 minute mark for sure, but you know, I think it's a pretty good sized episode. Not too big, not too small, not too hot, not too cold. So hopefully you feel the same way. Before we get out of here, we have some featured inspiration to share out. That's something we do at the end of every episode here on This Photo Life. It's one more for the road, if nothing else. And gang, we're going to get to that in a minute, because this week it's a photography book that it isn't actually a photo book in the sense of like loaded with photos, but it is a book that will definitely help you find some time for your photography, because it's a little textbook. It's a nice, quick, easy read. Not all the pages are even filled up completely with text, so you can certainly manage it. And I think it's something, as I say, will help you find time in your photography. But I'm sorry, that's just a teaser. I will get to that in a moment, because, gang, really quick, and again, not to stretch out the episode too far, since I started recording the show this week, well, as a lot of you know, Leonard Nimoy passed away. And I mean, I would be happy to mention this on the show anyways, because to pay tribute to the man, he was on Star Trek as Mr. Spock, and I think we can all agree he did a pretty good job of it. It was one of the more nuanced and slightly complex characters on the show, so it was good that we got someone who could bring it to that part with full effectiveness. I mean, Star Trek was also a bit of a game changer in its day. It was a little more thought out. It had some really positive messages out there that I think we can all agree are not the worst thing to have going on out there in this big wide world. And, you know, I mean, if you want to talk photography, before we talk about Mr. Nimoy again, Star Trek was the kind of show that encouraged you to go new places and see new stuff and kind of boldly go about it while you were doing it. So, you know, while there were cheesy plots and sometimes the budget wasn't so big for the special effects, there was a lot of good in that show. And as far as like encouraging looking out towards growth, towards doing the right thing, towards getting out there and finding stuff, I mean, I'm happy to bring up anyone who worked on that show in such a prominent way. So, I mean, Mr. Nimoy, just for that, I wish you so well on your next stage of the big journey there. And thank you so much for the Star Trek stuff. That already rocks. And I'm more than happy to leave it at that. But the thing is, gang, and this is part of why I wanted to mention it on the show, in case you missed it with all the obituaries and media pieces going on about him, Mr. Nimoy was also quite an accomplished photographer. He did a lot on the photo front, especially as far as going for a fine art female nude photography. So this is not your Playboy stuff, your Hustler, your Jugs, anything of that variety. I would say in a classy workplace, it's certainly suitable for work, because it's more about a creative vision than showing body bits for the sake of stimulation, if you will. And, you know, he did a really beautiful job of it. Part of what Mr. Nimoy did was work primarily in black and white in the way that he used it, and used it very nicely. But I would also point out, gang, that the message he was putting across with his fine art nude photography was rather positive. You know, we think of nude photography and we tend to think of rather ideal shapes, you know, slim waists, rather busty, a typical look, if you will. That's all been fed to us by the modern times, especially with Photoshop being used to make people skinnier and look like they would never look in reality. Well, the joy of recommending and mentioning Mr. Nimoy today is that Leonard Nimoy is a photographer. He did a lot of work towards just taking photos of nudes that weren't super perfect models. In fact, one of his projects, the one that I would suggest you start by looking at his work as, is the Full Body Project, which is all rather shapely, full-sized ladies. Some might say overweight, certainly. But, you know, I mean, at the heart of it, they are just women, and they are beautiful women. And Mr. Nimoy celebrates that both in the frame and the project around it, the text. Everything he put out there is all about how you're beautiful as you are. If you feel beautiful, that's what counts. And a lot of other positive messages that I think you should get over to the Full Body Project to discover for yourself properly. I mean, I'm a little emotional right now. I've lost one of my childhood totems in Mr. Spock. So I hope I'm just getting it and giving it justice. But as I say, gang, Leonard Nimoy, you know, we thank you for all your fine work on the stage and screen, big and small. Also, thank you so much for the photographer work, especially the kind that holds up to the ideals of Star Trek that says, we're all equal, and just because someone says something is one way doesn't mean that your way is the wrong way. So thank you for that, and definitely rest in peace. And hope this isn't too punny, but go boldly. So gang, death is never easy. I don't want to bring it down too much. Don't forget, too, that part of death is it's a healthy reminder that you should be living. So, we're going to bring it up now because, while Mr. Nimoy is gone, first off, he made the fine old age of 83. And while that isn't the highest number you can reach, it isn't a bad one. So I'm sure he lived a life worth smiling about. But at the same time, also, we're here. We got to move forward. So let's move forward. In fact, let's move forward to the end of the show, which, as you know, has a featured inspiration to it. And gang, I promised you a book, a title, and all sorts of ideas to send you off into the sunset with. Well, gang, the book that I have in my hands, The Photographer's Playbook. It's edited by Jason Fulford and Gregory Halpern. What the book is, gang, is 307 assignments and ideas for your photography. It's a compilation of advice, of suggestions, of homework by other photographers given to you in a nice, short, easy way. And it's really good. It will definitely open up some time on your photography. I say this because sometimes finding ideas isn't the easiest thing. Even if you're creatively minded, getting ideas for going out there and taking photos could be the hardest part of all some days. So whether it's strong in you, whether it's weak in you, I would highly suggest you get The Photographer's Playbook. It's put out by Aperture Publishing. It's got this awesome, funky red and white cover with The Photographer's Playbook. Nice, simple, and easy on the front. I highly recommend it. And gang, just on a note for that, I just want to point out, gang, that I did not pay for this book because this was given to me as a gift by a guest on my photo tour. James, you took the tour, you had a good time, you thanked me at the time, then you dropped me this email, say, give me your address, I have something to post you. You send me this awesome book called The Photographer's Playbook. It just tickles me pink with all the ideas that I can go out there and use my cameras on. And man, I thank you for that. Okay, so go check that out, gang. As I say, I got it for free, but, well, let's see, $24.95 in the US, £16.95 in the UK. That ain't so bad. We can all manage that. And if it opens up a big bag of whoop-ass creativity, I'd say it's money well spent. So I would certainly go out and buy this if I hadn't gotten a free copy from James, which I thank him for again. James, you the man. Cheers, fella. And yeah, Photographer's Playbook. Go out and get it, gang. And until then, gang, I guess that's all I have for this week. We're going to be back the third week of March because, as you know, we come out the first and third Wednesday of every month here on This Photo Life. My name is Andy McSweeney. If you want to check out my work, get over to andymcphoto.com, ANDYMCPHOTO.com. Or, of course, you can hit me up on the social networks, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, LinkedIn, all those sort of places I'm hanging around. And if you see Andy McSweeney or Andy McPhoto and a bunch of photography stuff, feel free to leave a comment, click the like, do the +1, all that sort of thing. And I know I did mention it a few times over the episode. That's because, gang, I'd love to hear from you. This show doesn't exist in a void. Some of you are sending out some messages privately and otherwise. Totally appreciate it, and I want to see some more. Certainly also, remember that Ask Andy is part of the show moving forward. So if you have any photography questions, if you have anything you want to ask me on the photographic front, just like I do as Photo Tour Brugge, if I have an answer, I'm more than happy to share it with you. And especially if I think it's something will benefit us all in this photo life, well, happy to hear it so I can throw it out there. Okay, so that's me for this week, gang. As I say, Andy McSweeney for This Photo Life. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now get me out of your ears and go out and go shooting.